I'm alive. I shouldn't be.
He should not be alive. This is unfucking believable.
From the heart of trucker America, my boy Reed Coverdale, host of The Naturalist Capitalist.
This is what government does. It sucks.
If you think you're going to win people over by stating commonplaces, you're just selling the other part.
It is about dictating every transaction that you have for the rest of your life.
Mr. Potato Head.
Coverdale is the guy to be president of the United States.
You intimidated me with your perfect 70s porn star.
That was the beginning of my problems.
He died doing what he loved, chasing a minor.
But I'll put a 50 cal attached to my Suburban.
Libertarians need to get out of New York.
The gulag is going to be in your house.
This guy's a fucking murderer. He deserves to be in a
Gotta get him out of that truck at night and get him into the White House.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to The Naturalist Capitalist and to, I think this is the fourth installment of Capitalist Communion, where two atheists and two Christian libertarians argue respectfully. I guess that's the reputation we've gained at this point, at least, that we can disagree and not hate each other, which is a novel idea these days. Before we get into our conversation, though, I want to start reminding everyone at the beginning of these videos, if you're watching this live on YouTube, in the next couple days, I will have this up on Odyssey in video format, and then I will also have it on Spotify and Apple Podcasts and a few other audio platforms if you would prefer to listen and not eat up so much data or whatever. So please go follow me on those platforms. They're linked in the description. Also follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, also linked in the description. And I will be having a website coming out soon. But for now, if you want to support me, please support me on Patreon. That is also linked into the description. Everything helps. I am going to be transitioning from full-time truck driving to getting more serious about this podcast and just trucking part-time. So all the support you guys can give me helps. But anyway, we didn't do Capitalist Communion in January. Unfortunately, the schedules just didn't align. But a lot has happened in the last couple of weeks that is very relevant to the type of stuff we talk about. So we got the whole crew here again: Wil Bell, Liam McCollum, and Jacob Daniel, or Jacob Winograd, or whatever the fuck his name is. How you guys doing tonight?
Doing good, man. How about yourself?
Good. Jacob, you're muted. Just letting you know.
Oh, sorry. I thought that I wasn't supposed to talk for this. No, I thought we established my name was Daniel. I'm not even Jacob Daniel anymore. It's just Daniel.
Just Daniel. Well, yeah. Just make up your mind, whatever it is, so we can
tell Liberty Twitter to make up their mind. They can't figure out what the fuck to call me.
Oh man, but it's been a crazy couple weeks as far as the type of shit we talk about on this podcast. We mostly, just in case new subscribers don't know, we typically talk about religion and lack of religion and faith and all that as it mixes in with the libertarian movement, the Libertarian Party, libertarian philosophy in general. But let me just start with this. We'll go around. Do you guys think Satanists should have First Amendment rights? We'll start with you, Will. What do you think?
Absolutely. And I think if you buck on that in the slightest, you should put in your libertarian card. You are not a real libertarian. And I know most of the people that are spouting off about that on Twitter don't care, but it's really like we should accept that they are not real libertarians if they can't come across and accept free speech for what it is.
What do you think, Liam?
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think the hardest part about this conversation, especially coming from a Christian perspective, is like, how would you even define what Satanism is and where would you draw that line? Like, I mean, if you are a Christian, you kind of believe that all sin comes from Satan and like you're included in that. So I don't really know where you would draw the line. Would it be people who are overtly worshiping Satan? I think that we all have our own gods if you do believe in Christianity. So I just don't know where you would draw that line, and it would be extremely risky, especially considering, I think it was in Romans, it says like, be careful if you judge because you do the same things. So it's I don't know. This is very scary territory when you start to try to get the law involved in speech, because speech isn't very good at like, I mean, law isn't very good at making distinctions between like reasonable actions and not. It's very rigid.
What do you think there, Daniel?
Satanists don't even have rights, let alone the right to free speech. I mean, no.
That's communists, I think.
Right.
No, I'm just kidding.
Same thing. No. Yeah, I mean, I think Top Lobster actually said it best, which is that censorship is really a trap. You know what I mean? Like, even if you could try to, you know, do all the mental gymnastics to make some sort of libertarian ethical justification for it, which I don't think you can. And I think, you know, Liam did a good job of demonstrating that. I think even just if you're looking at it from a strict, pragmatic, consequentialist, just like you know, just what are the going to be the effects of trying to do so, it's not going to produce the outcome you want anyway. You're just going to create a black market of those things, which tend to increase the things you're trying to ban rather than decrease them. So I think that whether you're talking about libertarianism ontologically or libertarianism from a more pragmatic standpoint, it's just bad all around.
Yeah, I agree with both of those points because, I mean, it's kind of like the homeless thing that just spiked up out of nowhere. No one was ever talking about homelessness at all until it became a conversation. And then suddenly everyone had these really strong opinions about what needs to be done. And it was sort of similar with this. I was like, since when are Satanists taking over the country? Like, when I even put a poll out, like, what's a bigger threat to the United States, Satanism or Zionism? And there were some funny jokes like, is there really a difference or whatever? Yeah. But I actually wasn't that familiar with Satanism, to be honest. I didn't know anything about it.
It's mostly just edgy atheists.
Well, it's not even really that. I looked this up, and I'll pull it up on the screen here. But, whoa, I'm not interested in learning more about the Satanic Temple. But these are the 7 fundamental tenets of Satanism. 1 should strive to act with compassion and empathy toward all creatures in accordance with reason. Number 2 is the struggle for justice is ongoing and a necessary pursuit that should prevail over laws and institutions. Number 3 is one's body is inviolable, subject to one's own will alone. The freedoms of others should be respected, including the freedom to offend. To willfully and unjustly encroach upon the freedoms of another is to forego one's own. Beliefs should conform to one's best scientific understanding of the world. One should take care never to distort scientific facts to fit one's beliefs. People are fallible. If one makes a mistake, one should do one's best to rectify it and resolve any harm that might have been caused. And number 7 is every tenet is a guiding principle designed to inspire nobility in action and thought. The spirit of compassion, wisdom, and justice should always prevail over the written or spoken word. So I'm interested to hear everybody's thoughts on that, but I tend to think that there's actually nothing explicitly bad in there. There are some things that could probably be weaponized in a bad way. I would say the same about the Bible, though. But
I was literally just about to chime in with that. The good idea, the Bible's never been weaponized.
Yeah, but I don't know. What do you guys think of that? I'll start with you, Will.
I've always been friendly to the not always, just since I've like kind of looked into it years ago. I've always kind of been friendly to this idea that this is a more moral set than the 10 Commandments. But to just explain why, it's just because it's a modern day like group of people trying to like summarize some sort of morality, just like we do with like outside of libertarianism, like in our own like secular discussions of like trying to set up like a moral guideline outside of like the Abrahamic rules. Like, this is a much more modern way of setting up like some kind of code to live by. I don't know. I think it's the perfect troll towards Christians, because when you like set the two beside each other, you can sit there and kind of like which one's better. Not to, be too much of an edgelord atheist, but I just am always thoroughly tickled when I see them in the news, like when they're putting the statues of Satan in the city hall and stuff like this. Brings very important conversations that our society has to have about secularism.
This is a great comment. I had to throw it up there.
For sure. Yeah. But yeah, man, it's just, I look at them as like champions of free speech. Because I look at our society as like mainly Christians of all different levels that are like looking at this, and this is almost like the ultimate taboo is playing with satanic imagery and stuff. I don't know. What do you guys? Does the blasphemy behind it hurt y'all as much as I think it does, or what?
I mean, I honestly, I was more triggered by the things you said than by reading the 7 points of Satanism, to be honest. But I mean, yeah, fully intentional. I mean, I can nitpick at it for sure, but it's, I don't know. Part of this is like, I really agree with what Liam said, which is like, it's just, to me, it's like, I think not even just to me, I think a consistent Christian position would basically be like, if somebody isn't Christian, then who are they following? So basically, if you're a Christian, you kind of think that the entire world is, to maybe varying degrees, followers of Satan. So it's kind of like, if we're going to ban Satanism, I don't know where that even ends. And to be offended or triggered by Satanism would just basically be like, it would almost be like I'd have to have a really big ego to do that, because I would have to basically throw out the parts of Christianity that speak to my own fallen, sinful nature and my own propensity to fall into idolatry, and if it weren't for the grace of God, to basically be a worshiper and follower of Satan, whether that's meant in a explicit way or meant implicitly or whatever. It's, to me, it's almost just distinctions without a difference. It's the same archetype being acted out, either way, as far as that goes. So that's, I guess, where I stand.
I thought there was one tenet in there. What number was it? Let's see. Number 5, beliefs should conform to one's best scientific understanding of the world. One should take care never to distort scientific facts to fit one's beliefs. That's something that I actually completely agree with, but the people who would find this philosophy attractive tend to do the exact opposite of that. I find that kind of funny. I mean, it doesn't seem when science is based on institutional findings that are government backed at this point in a lot of ways, and are backed by think tanks and societal reforms of certain leanings, it's very hard to imagine an actual neutral scientific approach to anything anymore. That's what I've realized over the last couple of years, because that was something that I really believed in before, but it's become pretty obvious that that's not possible.
I don't even know what science is anymore. Like, is science a noun or is it a verb? Because I always thought that science was a process. You know what I mean? And so to say like science says something is, to me, almost like just grammatically incorrect. It's like, like humans say things, and our tests, the test results will say things, but science is, to me, I've always thought is just more of it's a process of, making a hypothesis and testing it and over again, trying to see if you can disprove it, and just an
That's
ongoing
actually
seeking
how
of truth.
I've always described science as not a way to know truth, but a way to know what's not true. Like science basically just disproves things. It never gets you all the way to proving what is real. It just basically disproves all the dumb ideas that you can't, so it gets you close, but everything is still a theory, right? Like even something as simple as gravity is still a theory. If you could disprove how we have arrived at that conclusion, then that won't be true anymore. That's just how science works. So the idea of like trust the science or the science is settled, you've turned science into a non-scientific process that has become a religion instead, which is kind of echoing what you said. I just used a Christian term there, echoing what you said. So
you're 100% on that. It's like science works best when scientists are trying to disprove each other. That's the only way we get to what is as close to truth as we can decipher.
Right, which is why I've always been bothered by the climate debate. Not to go on too much of a tangent, but when they go like 99% of climate scientists agree, I'm like, what other field do 99% of people agree on anything? Like that just smells like fucking bullshit from the very get-go.
Yeah.
What's weird about the tenets that they had listed there is that nothing seems. I mean, there are a few things that I could actually nitpick, but that tenet specifically didn't seem to be like counter to Christianity in any sense, and like at least in the way that I think Christians understand Satanism, like Satanism proper. It's like it would seem that the tenets aren't even really Satanist. There are elements of it, like I think that there were elements of like selfishness. Yeah, I can. Let me read that really quick.
Well,
I actually made this. I was arguing with Tho Bishop on Twitter about this. I was saying that there's nothing explicitly un-Christian in here.
I think the only thing in here,
like,
number 3 is a bit of a gray area. If it's not explicitly un-Christian, but it's a little in conflict because one could make the argument depending on there's different, depending on your theological bend within Christendom. Some people would have issue with the idea that your will is, completely subject to you because, I would even say that there's a degree to which God has, a degree of control over everything, including our own actions. There's debate to what degree that will is and how, how much that influence over our will and control over it is, maybe some atheists would find that to be troubling from a libertarian perspective, but just strictly from a Christian one, it's that one's probably the most open to debate.
Well, it's been interesting because I've been seeing I'm blocked by what's his name, not Cyprian, who's the other guy that tags along with Cyprian a lot, Matt Erickson. I'm blocked by him, but Cyprian and some other people have been making a lot of they're almost like atheist libertarian arguments against Christianity. It's been interesting to watch. They're like saying libertarianism is evil because it focuses on the individual instead of on God, and that's a lie. And Tho Bishop was even saying some of that in an argument we were having on Twitter. We had a great video discussion, but then our Twitter discussion, I think, was a downgrade from that, where we were arguing about individualism and whether or not liberty was enough on its own. And he was saying that, the submission to a higher power is actually completely necessary, which is where a lot of atheist libertarians would argue that Christianity isn't compatible with libertarianism. I think it is, personally. Like I know enough people who have justified it, but to say like number 3 in these tenets doesn't align with libertarianism, to me is the same as saying like property rights don't align with libertarianism.
It definitely aligns with libertarianism. It just might not align with Christian. It might be.
That's what. I meant with Christianity. To say it doesn't align with Christianity is like saying property rights don't align with Christianity, or self-ownership doesn't align with Christianity.
It might be one of those things where it can be. It's an error of omission. I can't talk. God, it's an error of omission. Maybe is what I would say. It's not so much wrong because anything that's stated there is incorrect, but it can be maybe challenged because it's like an incomplete picture of what Christianity would say is true. Because I think there is a Christian case for self-ownership and property rights, but it's a little to just state that by itself from a pure Christian perspective is incomplete, I think.
Yeah, the way that I saw the third tenet, and that's what I was looking for, that the only thing that really kind of stood out to me is like more of like do you guys know who Aleister Crowley is? Do what thou wilt. It's more of like because I guess the way that I see libertarianism and the way that I come at libertarianism is not so much through an individualistic one, like necessarily individualistic one. I think that you can come at it in various ways, and there is one way in which you come at it through like kind of like this atomistic Ayn Rand individualism, maybe even like a libertine type way, like the Aleister Crowley type angle. But I think there's also another way. I did a podcast with my friend Ethan Holmes. Everyone should follow him on Twitter at _posts. And we were talking about kind of this altruistic libertarianism, where it starts with more of like a Christian principle of loving your neighbor as yourself and loving God above all things. And then from there, you kind of get principles like the non-aggression principle. It's kind of like the reason I'm against the war in Yemen. I could argue that the reason I'm against the war in Yemen is because they're using my tax dollars and they're devaluing my dollar. But the real reason that I'm opposed to the war in Yemen is because they're killing children and they're killing people. So it's like, I could approach libertarianism in a very selfish way, which I think is kind of more like the do what thou wilt perspective. But I approach it more through a Christian selfless way, I guess.
Well, it's kind of this reminds me of the last conversation I had with Will's favorite person, Andrew from Popular Liberty. He said that like libertarianism and Christianity are like one of their they share a core tenet, but stated in completely opposite ways. Because Christianity is do unto others as you would have them do unto you, but libertarianism is like almost the inverse of that, which is like don't do unto others what you would have them not do unto you. Which I thought was a kind of a good way to look at it. And it's sort of like, so what's stated in libertarianism is stated in what's Christianity, but Christianity goes a bit beyond that, because it's not just about what you shouldn't do to your neighbor, but it's also about what you should do. And while I would think it's wrong to insist that the things that God tells us to do when we love our neighbor should be implemented as some sort of law that we would coerce people into doing, because I think that is self-contradictory. I do think that the Christian worldview does have something that, it's not exactly like a positive right, but it's like you have positive moral duties and obligations onto your neighbor and stuff. And you kind of like, I think, wasn't it James or somebody was like, you kind of are your brother's keeper. Whereas libertarianism would say like, well, you're really not your brother's keeper. Just don't aggress against him.
Yeah, I've made this point before that libertarianism is not a moral framework for being a great person. It's just basically how to not be a shitty person, or not even not to be a shitty person, just to not be an aggressive person. You could have a starving man, or who's on the verge of death, crawl up to your doorstep and beg you for a loaf of bread, and you could have tons of groceries, more than you need, and you could still say like, fuck you, get off my property, and slam the door in his face. And you haven't aggressed against him technically. You haven't violated any of his rights. He's on your property. You don't owe him anything. So you were a very shitty person to do that, but you didn't do anything necessarily aggressive. So people who look for the fullness of morality in the non-aggression principle, it's like trying to be a Christian, and it's like trying to embrace the fullness of Christianity by not stealing and not killing and not worshiping false gods and not like trying to emulate the fruits of the spirit or trying to live by Christ's example or whatever. It's just like an empty way to live if that's the entirety of your framework for living a happy life, I guess.
That's just like, that's part of what, like, we just have to, I think we all accept it, but libertarianism is just that. It's it's just an absence of aggression on people. It's us trying to dismantle the state. We're never going to agree what perfect morality is. Like, I mean, it's just, we're all coming at this from different perspectives, but we can all agree on libertarian ideals. And I think the people that are trying to like influence libertarianism with a certain religious view or a certain, like maybe a social justice view or any of these kind of things where we have to like, we all have to agree what morality is, whether it's saying the N word or saying, you know, praise God, all this kind of stuff. We're going to have to like let all that shit lie and focus on hating the state, focus on, you know, legalizing marijuana, ending the terror wars, all this kind of stuff, ending the bombings in Yemen, whether it's because we care about our money or care about the lives of all these children that our money is being used to kill.
Yeah. No, I think this comes to like a really like an observation I've made over the past like month and a half. So I had a really awkward, and it was both illuminating but also equally confounding conversation like 2 or 3 months ago with Adam Patrick, I think his name is. And that conversation it was only like an hour long, but somehow that conversation became a conversation in all the post-libertarian podcasts. Like Matt Erickson and Adam talked about it, and then Matt talked about it with James Gentleman, and like they all kept talking about this conversation that I had with Adam, which I did not expect that to be something that they would care about so much. But they were viewing it as like, this is the problem with libertarians, is that like because they thought they caught me in something that was exposing me as a bad Christian, is basically how I was interpreting their response to that conversation. Because Adam was asking me like, well, what is missing from the Bible that you think that you need to add libertarianism to it? And I was like, well, I don't think I need to add libertarianism to the Bible. I just think that libertarianism is essentially taught in the Bible. And the problem is like, as much as, you know, as a Christian, I want to see people saved and I want to bring people to Christ. I want to see the gospel impact their life. I also recognize that like, A, not everybody is going to be a Christian, and B, I have to interact with those people. And if all I ever do is preach at them and try to shove the Bible down their throats, then that cuts off my ability to do anything else with them, which it impacts. I mean, for one, it impacts my ability to continue to be a witness, you know, to them and to have better opportunities down the road to talk about religion and faith and things like that. But B, then it's like, you know, I'm restricting my ability to just operate in the world because, you know, I'm just like I'm going to be the angry atheist equivalent of a Christian. You know what I mean? And nobody really wants to be around those people. So what I told them was one of my missions here is that like, although Christianity is like my highest, like, you know, plank, I guess, in terms of the way that I operate in the world, libertarianism is right after that. And I view it as very important because we need to have a framework for how to operate in society with people who aren't Christians if we don't want there to be constant war and conflict. And this is something that the Bible tells us to do. It says in Romans 12, that insofar as it depends on you, live at peace with all of those around you. And even to the extent of loving your enemies and blessing those who persecute you. It's like, so if I'm going to do that, then I need to foster some sort of, you know, legal order that allows that to exist, because the Bible is pretty clear that those who don't have the same beliefs as us will always exist. And this sort of, you know, I think this is the problem with why there are some people who are going out who are just like going crazy autistic about wanting to ban Satanism, because it's like, to them, it's like they, I think, are denying what the Bible says. It's like they think that the goal is to eliminate Satanism and to eliminate degeneracy. Like that's what they think that they're supposed to do as Christians. And it's like, and it's not even that I disagree with them, but like, I think the problem is they're operating in this like insane high time preference fashion where they're confusing means and ends and not realizing how using unchristian means will ultimately lead to unchristian ends. Like the way that a Christian.
What are you, just principled or something, Jacob? That's supposed to be the
I know.
throwback.
Right.
Like, yes, I am correct. That is correct.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I know I'm going on a rant there, but like the point I'm trying to hone in on is that like these people, like they care more. They think they care more about being Christian than I do. But I think the problem is that they are ignoring this one crucial part of like, this is like Orthodox Christianity. Like this is not something that, some Christians embrace and some don't. Like, you know what I mean? Like loving your neighbor and loving, trying to live at peace with all. I mean, Jesus said, blessed are the peacemakers. Like, so that's what we should be trying to do. And if you think if you're going to ban Satanism, you are just creating an atmosphere where you basically say like evangelism is dead and we are now Islam, and you are going to join the church by conquest and by the sword, or you're going to be driven out of society. It's like, and that to me, that just couldn't be more contrary to the message that Jesus taught.
I think you just like the mention of high time preference right there. A lot of the people who are kind of in this post-libertarian or whatever they want to call themselves, like that camp, their critique of high time preference is really interesting because it doesn't acknowledge the low or high time preference of how you address those people, those degenerate people, as they would call them. And the funny thing, just a little aside, is that I don't think, and maybe I'm wrong about this, I don't think Austrian economics actually makes like a critique of either low time preference or high time preference. That's just something that is kind of read into it, because high time preference and low time preference are just observations of what happens with interest, and that's really what it is. It's not like Austrian economics passes judgment on either. That comes from outside. It comes from like conservatism, or it comes from Christianity. So as a Christian, I actually do critique high time preference behavior, but I also think that the way that you handle the high time preference behavior needs to be efficient, and it needs to be I mean, you can't address it by using force. I think that using force is actually a high time preference behavior, because as we've seen throughout history, we've seen prohibition does not actually stomp out whatever you're trying to outlaw. I mean, even Christianity spread because it was being, like everyone was being persecuted.
Right.
So it's like, I think that the better way to address degeneracy, as they would call it, would be to try to command someone's heart through words rather than trying to command someone through force.
You mean to do what Jesus did?
Exactly.
What I find ironic is a lot of these people are more high time preference than I am, where if I were a Christian, I'd be as low time preference as you could get because I wouldn't really care that much about this life. Like the only
belief in eternity tends to do that to a person.
Well, you would think it would do that to a person.
Well, yeah,
but it doesn't. It doesn't seem to. It seems to do the opposite. Like somehow, me caring about. So I mean, a lot of these people are like saying we need to vote Republican and we need to vote for the slightly lesser of two evils because, this is real life. This isn't some theoretical bullshit I'm thinking about. And it's like, well, it's real life to me too. But I'm 27 years old. And I actually want to be involved in creating something good. I don't, Trump might have been a tiny bit better than Biden, but that's not a worthy enough cause for me to invest any time or effort in. Like Trump still murdered millions of people and spent trillions of dollars and expanded surveillance power and all sorts of horrible shit. Like there's nothing worth jumping on that bandwagon for me. So my lower time preference is I want to invest in a party, or at least people in the Republican Party who are worth investing in, because I care about what happens in this country, because I have to live in it for another 65 years or whatever, however old I live to. And then, people who are younger than me, they've also got to live in it. And I also care about all the people that are getting, murdered by our state policies, and I care about all the people who are in prison. And it's just weird that a lot of like this new kind of ultra religious, like post-libertarian movement or whatever is extremely self-centered and extremely high time preference, because in my mind, both of those directly conflate the idea of Christianity. Like the whole, I mean, I don't think Jesus was very concerned with how persecuted you were. You know, I mean, that was why a lot of the Jews didn't like him, because he wasn't there to get rid of the Romans. You know, it wasn't about getting rid of the Romans. It was about like worrying about your soul and other people's souls, and that you're right with God and that you live the way God does, you know, the way Jesus does. And I don't understand that. I don't understand why that misses as much as it does, I guess. What do you think, Liam? I want to hear your thoughts on that one.
I mean, something that I think is missed about like Christianity, and the hardest thing about this is I really don't know if these people are Christians, or if they just kind of believe in like a presuppositionalism or something, where they think that like Christianity kind of undergirds all of society and all moral systems. Like I don't know if that's how they're coming at this thing. So it's really hard to critique them. But if they are coming from more of a Christian perspective, it's like, I mean, I think if we just look at who Christ was, like the fact that we call him a king of all kings, and he defied really what it meant to be a king, like throughout history, like the fact that he didn't use force. What it really meant was to humble himself and sacrifice himself. I think it also really gets to what it means to be a man, and it's almost like that, like the current reaction, I think, is kind of based out of fear, and that's where the high time preference behavior comes from. It's wanting to respond in kind rather than doing the more, though it might take longer, I think the more effective thing is to try to convince people through ideas, through love, through action, rather than using force. Because as I mentioned, like Christianity spread because they were persecuted. Prohibition does not work. It didn't work with drugs. If you look at Iran, the reason that Islam isn't working there and people are reverting to paganism is because they use force. Like this is just a common theme throughout history. So I just don't really know where it's coming from. And I also, for people who follow Ron Paul and who got into the movement because of Ron Paul, I think they really do not appreciate the message of like revolution through ideas. That what he was saying, really the core of it was a Christian idea, that like the more effective way to achieve freedom is to actually convince people that freedom is the right way to get there, not to use force, because all revolutions that have used force, people end up responding with resentment and hatred, and they reject authority. Like you actually want to convince people of virtue in order for something to take effect. So that's my thought.
Yeah, I mean, I think that a lot of this is not sincere belief. It's just utilitarianism. You know, they think like, okay, this is a cultural norm that has existed for a long time, and we can use it to kind of bring society back to where we want it. I don't think that there is a ton of sincere belief going on here. And ironically, that's very Pharisee-like, you know, trying to use the church and force and, you know, judgment against people who don't follow the law. There's nothing Christ-like about it. So I just find it all very ironic. But
I would say like just like calling for the use of force to spread your religion is almost an omission that you just don't think it'll spread on its own through peaceful means.
Yeah.
And almost like it's more blasphemous to me than anything I'm saying about the satanic.
It means you think you think your ideas are weak.
Yeah, for sure.
I think
go ahead.
It really is just a high time preference option. I think that it's very myopic, and they think that like, I mean, this is part of our critique of law, is just that like writing something down on paper doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to do anything. Like it's not effective at its job. Like I really do think that kind of this message that comes from Christianity and that Ron Paul really showed through his movement is that the best way to achieve freedom and spreading these ideas, spreading Christianity, is through, action, showing people that you truly do reflect these ideas, and kind of showing them what it really means to be a Christian, what it really means to be in favor of peace and in favor of love. And though it might be difficult, and though it might take longer, I mean, it'll last longer. It's not as fleeting as it is to just force it on people.
Well, it isn't like, to me, the Old Testament is just like it's like the longest narrative of like somebody, like people trying the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result, which is like they kept trying to use a state and to use conquest and to use coercion to create a more godly society, and it never worked. It just kept getting worse and worse and worse. And then like the whole idea behind why, I say this a lot on my podcast, and it's just, I don't know if I've said it here before, it's worth bringing up, but like the whole reason why the Jews rejected Jesus as Messiah, I mean, not the whole reason, but like a major part of the equation for why they rejected him, was because they thought that Jesus was going to be a political Messiah, somebody who came and would lead them in rebellion against the Romans and reinstitute the kingdom of Israel. But Jesus said, my kingdom is not of this world, and I came to, we don't fight against flesh and blood, but we struggle against principalities and the forces of darkness. And he was a spiritual Messiah that came not to bring people to God through might and conquest and coercion, but rather through inspiring people just by living your life as an example of virtue, and through the commitment to truthful speech. And that's it. That is what Jesus embodied. And I don't even think you don't have to be a Christian, or like you don't have to be a believe in the metaphysical implications of all this to find value just in that archetype and in that story, where it's like Jesus is the archetypical embodiment of the Logos. And I think that is just something that whether you get behind that as being real to you in the way that I think it's real to me or not, I think it's just his example should be something that we can learn from, which is that like Jesus accomplished what he said to accomplish, not like the most force he used was using a whip against some animals and flipping over some tables in the temple. Like that's the most violent Jesus got. Other than that, he he had the means to be as violent, if you believe, if he was who he said he was. He had the means to really be as violent as he could have been, in both the protection of his own life or in trying to correct injustices. But he really modeled that. I think the kind of, like, again, it's like, as libertarians, I would hope that even if that my non-Christian libertarians could find some wisdom and some value in just that sort of example that Jesus gave us.
One day we're going to have to go down that whole Gnostic rabbit hole, the Gnostic Christianity rabbit hole. I think you don't like the blasphemy behind it, but a lot
I don't
of
like
what
the
you
blasphemy behind it. No, but I like a lot. But this is what I like about Jordan Peterson, and I do like the practice of finding psychological and archetypical truths within the Bible. I just think that it doesn't end there.
I didn't even know Peterson got into that. Does he?
Oh, you should, dude. He has like these long, like several hour biblical lectures on Genesis and Exodus that are just, I mean, insane.
I got into Gnostic just learning about that from Duncan Trussell. Do y'all know who Duncan Trussell is? The comedian. No. He's the super hippie best friend of Joe Rogan, and he's one he's influenced my spiritual evolution for sure.
By the way, can I just do a shout out to H. Reardon, who always manages to be the stereotypical atheist, bringing up
I was
in the comments like the whole but the Bible talked about slavery.
I was actually going to bring him up because I was going to say, by the way, Reardon. I do appreciate that you watch like pretty much every live stream I do. That's great.
He watches all my stuff too. So I mean, I
do
like
appreciate that. But there are not a lot of people like him. He's one of the only autistically annoying atheists that I know. Like, I'm going to be completely honest about this. Like, there is an extreme prejudice against atheists, and I'm tired of pretending there isn't in the libertarian movement and in like the conservative movement. And I think this was really magnified with James Lindsay a few weeks ago, because talk about a guy who's not a Reddit atheist. Like, that guy came on my show and talked for 2 hours, and the first like half hour was just us shitting on the new atheist movement for bringing so much woke bullshit into it, and trying to make atheism into a religion. And then we talked about how much truth there is in the Bible as far as the message goes, and how much value you can derive from it, and how having people pray for you even if you don't believe in it is still like, feels good that people care about you. Like, we did nothing but talk about like all the all the benefits of Christianity and having a religion. And then I saw this altercation take place on Twitter, and a lot of people just saw it toward the end. But what it was people trying to tell James, you need Jesus or you're going to hell. And he ended up pushing back and saying, stop trying to evangelize to me, because it's only going to make me hate you. And they kept pushing. And so then he started dunking on people, and it turned into this huge war. And then there were like sort of high profile people saying that he has no place in the conservative movement, which I was like, by the way, I loved that. I was like, perfect. The conservatives are showing how, narrow-minded and retarded they are. I love it. But it was also people kind of in this post-libertarian camp, or like heavily Christian anarchist or heavily Christian libertarian leaning people that wanted him like to have nothing to do with any of it anymore. And I was like, what are you guys talking about? I mean, there are like, let's just use this comparison. How many accounts do you find out there that are based on atheism, or that are like, in their bio, it says like, there is no God, I'm an atheist, or who like constantly do nothing but, trounce Christianity, at least with a high number of followers? There's like none of them. I mean, all those types of people are Democrats. They're all in the liberal dumbass movement, and we hate all of them. Like, and Will and I hate them just as much as you guys do.
Yeah, most of them are my alt accounts.
But there's this idea that Christians are somehow persecuted in the liberty movement, and I just think it's bullshit. I don't see it from anyone important at all. I mean, some of the important people are atheists, but I don't see this. I don't see a constant dragging of Christianity, and I do see it the other way. Like, if you're at all vocal about the fact that you don't believe in God, then you are instantly put on a tightrope. It's like, okay, we're watching you very closely, and we're going to monitor very carefully what you say. And if you say anything out of line, you are a Reddit atheist. So, for example, like that shit with Thaddeus Russell, someone posted, this is what libertarianism without religion gets you. And I mean, I just posted a link to the Catholic Church being found out that they had a couple 100,000 cases of pedophilia just in France since the 1950s. And people were jumping all over me for saying like I was a Reddit atheist and I hated Christians. And then I made a couple very, very calm posts about how I think there's an unfair slant against non-believers as opposed to people who believe. And I had all sorts of people jumping on me for that. If I said anything remotely close to the opposite of what that guy said about if you don't have religion, you end up wanting to diddle kids. If I had said anything like, if you're a Christian, then you won't care if, non-believers are murdered by the thousands or something stupid like that. Like, I would have just had people jumping all over me. I don't think that's true. Just like I don't think what this fucking idiot said is true. But there is no comparison. And I'm just like, I mean, I don't think it's fair to say there is. And I just want to hear what you guys think.
Well, I think I see what you're saying. I think it depends on what part of the liberty movement you're looking at. Like, I think in our circles, what you're saying is pretty much true. But I think that the Libertarian Party the establishment
Let me just
party
stop you real
over
quick, though. Like, who outside of our circle that goes after Christians is prominent at all?
Oh, well, I mean, they're losing prominence, and I'm happy about that. But like for the longest time, the Libertarian Party, well, maybe not persecuting Christians, has fostered a environment that's pretty intentionally hostile towards Christians and conservatives just in general, I would say. So, and I think that the Mises Caucus has made great efforts to change that, and certainly it needs to be careful to not create an overcorrection, which perhaps that's part of what's happening here, is that there's a little bit of that natural overcorrection and backlash where it's like, Christians have been like Christian libertarians have felt shit on for so long, and now they're pushing back a little bit to be like, hey, we deserve a seat at the table, which fair enough, but just make sure that you don't kick the other people out of the table because they deserve a seat too. So I think I hear what you're saying, and I do, it does bother me when I see the Christian libertarians out there who are, I mean, it's okay to have, like, I have the opinion that society without God and without religion will, like, I obviously think that would be bad and society would get worse, but I also think it's fair to point out that there's plenty of hypocrisy and corruption and sin within the church. So it's one of those things. It's like, don't throw stones in glass houses. You know what I mean?
What would you say is some of the things that make you feel like Christians are picked on in the liberty movement, like, or was in the past? Like, what were some of the things that maybe non-believers could work on?
For the longest time, it was like if you were any degree of pro-life, you weren't. It was like you couldn't be considered a libertarian, and if you were, even moderately conservative leaning in your social views, you would be kind of looked down upon as a libertarian. And
to be fair, though, that's policy related, right? Like, that's not religion. I mean, that's, if it's because it's your pro-life, then it's because of a policy you have. It's not because of your religion. Like, if you were pro-choice, but you're still vehemently personally against it, like Jacob Hornberger or something, I don't think there was any animosity toward that, right?
Yeah, I don't know. I guess maybe not. But to Christians who are coming in and, like, what do you do about, the Libertarian Party? It's not just like, I think all of us here are pretty much ANCAP leaning, if not full ANCAP. So, like, obviously we don't have much argument here because we all ideally just don't want a state and don't want any laws about abortion. But then what do we do? Do we say that libertarians who are minarchists and who are Christians and who think, oh, well, I'm against the wars and I'm against the war on drugs and I'm against the Fed and I want, a sound monetary policy or decentralization, but I'm not an anarchist and I still want some state. I want that minimal state. And, for those minarchists who are Christian who think that abortion is murder and one of the few legitimate functions of government should be to, not let people murder,
Yeah, I mean, I have no issues with that. Like, what you're describing.
I know you don't, but there was for the longest time, that sort of libertarian Christian has not had a seat at the table within the party, at least.
But what I'm saying is the atheist libertarians, they don't have any, I mean, at least as far as I know, they don't have any statist views that they're trying to push on Christians. Whereas I can understand someone being upset that Christian libertarians would want the state enforcing something, even though I don't have any, like, I mean, I certainly can empathize with people who want laws about abortion because I get it. Like, I totally do. But for people who disagree, I can understand why they're upset that they would want to pass laws regarding it. So I don't think that's an anti-Christian sentiment. I think it's just a fact that they want laws enforcing Christian values, where, at least as far as I know, none of the atheist libertarians want laws enforcing atheist values or like degenerate values or whatever. Like they just want the state out of the picture. So I think there's a little bit of a difference there, if you know what I'm saying.
Well, to be fair to y'all, like, I mean, some of the atheist libertarians that maybe would be more confrontational in your view, they just have different blind spots. Like where certain like Christian leaning people do have maybe a more like a blind spot towards abortion. And I say blind spot as far as like pure libertarian philosophy of not using the state to enforce something on people. But like there's a lot of libertarians that are atheists that maybe like have a more of a social justice view on speech or all kind of stuff like that. Not that
right, but no
I don't even. It might not even be
though, right?
Yeah, I wouldn't even know if I would blame it on like an atheist culture. I think it was just more of a slightly left social justice-y culture that the libertarian, at least the part of the movement that's consisted within the party for the last couple decades, I think.
By the way, I'm going to be super distracted by Will's guns the rest of the show. That's going to be a problem. But
I'm trying not to be autistically triggered by the one comment saying landowners should be free to murder people on their own land, which I can't tell if that was a troll comment or if that was meant completely
based. Leave them alone.
I was gonna say, so like, I mean, we still get some pushback if someone tries to like if we were to try to change the platform here in Montana to make it more pro-life, just get rid of the current platform in the Libertarian Party, like we would get pushback, but I don't know if it's necessarily from like an anti-Christian perspective as much as it is like an anti-conservative perspective. I still think it's really dumb because we're keeping out like a lot of people who would join the party.
Yep.
But I just being around you and associating with you for like the last year, I have been able to see a lot of people who are reacting to atheism in a way that I don't find very Christian. And I don't know really what it is. Like, I mean, I think that even Christians should be able to understand that the Holy Spirit uses non-believers. Like Jordan Peterson, he is not a Christian. He doesn't believe in God. Like he says that. I don't know where he's at now, but for the longest time,
that was true. I think that was true up until about like 4 months ago.
Yeah. But either way, like before then, he was bringing so many people into Christianity. Like I know so many people who are now Christians because they listen to his biblical series. And James Lindsay provides a lot for Christians too. Like the fact that he is pointing to this philosophy, critical theory that really is based in like what I would say is like the most sinful parts of our human nature, like just resentment and all of this. Like the fact that he's like taking this apart and really kind of deconstructing it for what it is, like should be valuable to every Christian. And I think every conservative and I think every libertarian and things that you've been doing, Reed, like I just don't understand where this comes from. And I do think it is kind of a reactionary thing and maybe reflexive, and they might not be actually rationalizing their way through
than that. I think the problem is the church is filled with multiple generations of people who have been raised up weak in the faith. And when their faith that's very weak is attacked by atheists and their arguments, which are actually like 90% of the arguments that atheists make are actually like valid criticisms that even if I can provide good answers for, the only reason I've been able to find those good answers is that like at one point I didn't, and I was met with those objections and went, oh wow, I hadn't considered that before. And there's a reason why a lot of Christians leave the faith when they're confronted with these lines of questions, is because the church has done a very poor job of raising. And I'm not saying like the church like broadly, not just even institutionally, like parents have done a bad job. Christian parents have done a bad job in instilling the values and kind of like, I mean, I forget the exact passage, but there's a passage in the New Testament where Paul says you need to be ready to provide a defense for your faith. Your faith is not just supposed to be some intellectually lazy, like mindless exercise. There needs to be reason and intentionality and a humbleness to what you do. And there's just too many Christians who, I think, instead of when they're presented with the critiques that atheists bring, instead of that pushing them to go, that's a really good point you made. I don't know what the answer is. I'm going to pray about it. I'm going to talk to my pastor about it. I'm going to, find some suggested reading from scripture, or maybe some Bible studies on this subject, and wrestle with this a little bit. Like, that's what we're supposed to do with Christians. Like, I mean, that's like, is Israel means to wrestle with God. That's why, that's what we are supposed to, and the church is the new Israel. That's what we are supposed to do. But instead of that, it's just like, we want commercialized Christianity. We want our nice music services, and people want to show up and be entertained. It's just, it's basically, they want a 60-minute entertainment concert that's Christianized, basically. That I love the way my dad would describe it. It's just people who like to show up once a week and do a spiritual circle jerk. He got us kicked out of a church for saying that once. But
well, if the church is the new Israel, it should be getting $3 billion a year in aid from the federal government soon.
What happened to separation of church and state? Oh my God.
I'm gonna try not to toot my own horn here with this, but I think the reason a lot of these Christians hate people like me and James Lindsay is we actually know what we're talking about, and we're also not.
The Bible more than 90% of the people who, yeah.
And then also,
I used to think I knew the Bible, and the more I hang out with Reed, I'm like, I don't fucking know this shit. I forgot a lot.
Christians like the reactionary Reddit atheist to be their opposition, just like atheists would like kind of the dumbass evangelical who's only read Romans and doesn't know anything else about what he's talking about. And so when you have someone who actually knows the book and has actually lived the life and, has actually had a dad who's a deacon and done child evangelism fellowship and the whole 9 yards, and isn't just triggered about it and actually makes what I would say are rational critiques over it, that drives them crazy. And then especially when I'm not an asshole and when I'm sometimes more Christ-like than a lot of these people who are pushing this book, I don't think that's a good look for them. So I think that's why a lot of people hate me, but I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. Again, I think it's just low self-esteem and a weak faith, because this is a personality type that you see, there are blue-pilled libertarians that, have this reaction when the more, Austrian, well-read libertarians come in and challenge their ideas. It's like, you don't respond with humility to be like, hey, I don't know everything, and maybe I'm wrong about this. It's like, lash out and be angry because somebody's making me uncomfortable. So it's sad and unfortunate. All we can, I hope that, Liam, I think, does a good job, and I think I try to do a good job at not doing that and trying to be an example of not doing that. Being a snowflake doesn't accomplish anything. Maybe you need to follow, to bring Jordan Peterson again, like maybe you need to get your own room in order before you go out to criticize other people.
Take the log out of your own eye before the speck out of your neighbor's eye, in other words. Yeah. So I also did want to throw this point in. I'm interested to hear what you guys think on this too. I'm kind of sick of hearing people say that Christianity brings about a happier lifestyle necessarily. I think it can, but I know my experience is anecdotal, but the church I went to, the guy who taught my Sunday school most of the time I was growing up, he shot himself when I was 18. We had a guy who came to our church for a couple years. He murdered a woman and chopped her up in his backyard and burned her in his fire pit, and then came back to church for another service before he ended up getting arrested. There's tons of divorce, like completely dysfunctional marriages, people who are nothing but angry because, you know, we have these prayer meetings Wednesday nights and you hear about all the trouble everybody's going through on Wednesday night when you're meeting with all the guys having prayer meeting, or when you're out on retreats with the church and you're having fellowship time. You hear about the shit that's going on, and it might add some sort of release that they otherwise wouldn't have, but I'm not convinced that it brings any release that just a secular meeting where you're telling everyone all this stuff would bring about. But all that to say, there are a lot of people who I think are kind of new to Christianity or don't know much about it or have just found it, and this is in our circles, like in the liberty movement, and they're pointing to it as something that brings you more fulfillment. And I lived in the church my entire, you know, childhood into my teenage years, and then a little bit in my early 20s. And I can just say that that's unequivocally not true from my experience. Like, people are just as dysfunctional, just as hopeless, just as distraught, just as angry, just as evil in the church as they are outside of the church. But I want to hear from you, Will, because you've gone from the church to outside the church. Is that what you've noticed too, or what do you think?
Yeah, man, I couldn't agree more. You know me, I'm the one that really pushes back on the idea of like Christian morality being superior to like just an atheistic one. And yeah, that's my experience. But it's hard to like really draw like 100% comparison, because there are, especially where I live, like most people are Christian. So, I mean, like, you're going to get every shade of that. Am I cutting out, or are y'all cutting out?
I can hear you fine.
Okay, cool. But yeah, I don't know. I dislike that talking point as much as you do. I have very much the same experience of just seeing a lack of faith and full of faith people just messing up in the same capacity.
I think the kind of, I don't even really know how to characterize it. I think it is kind of what Jacob was talking about earlier with the kind of commercialization of Christianity. I think what you're describing actually kind of does a disservice to Christianity. This idea that like when you become a Christian, like everything is great after that. There's this really good documentary that I watched a while ago. It's called, I think it's called The American Gospel. There are a lot of problems with it, I think, but it addresses the prosperity doctrine pretty well, which is just the idea that, like, you know, God wants you to be rich, like these televangelists that you see. And I think that like it kind of creates this surface level Christianity where as soon as you run into problems in your life, you fall out of it. And I mean, these people haven't read Ecclesiastes. Like it's one of the like most depressing books I've ever read, and I personally like it for that reason. Kind of like this more existential like look at things. But I do think that it gives you. I think that if you are to follow it, you are going. It can help you. I do think that like it can help you. So, and it's more just saying that like your life will not be perfect, but if you are to follow this, it can be better. But
I've seen it go ahead, finish your point.
Well, I was just going to say like when I first really started to get into Christianity, I had a conversation with my pastor, and first thing he said is like, Christians are not perfect. In fact, like most of the one of the biggest reasons that people come into Christianity is because they are at their worst. Like they really are at this moment where they do understand that they are the chief of all sinners. If you've heard that phrase, and it's like it's a very, I think it is kind of, sometimes it's very depressing to put yourself up against the measure of Christ and the measure of the Bible. But I think that it's also the best goalpost to strive towards. And I think that doing it will actually provide meaning and it will give you perspective and stability. But that doesn't mean that there won't be suffering. It'll provide meaning. And I really like the Chesterton quote that's like, there's only one way to stand straight and infinite ways to fall down.
I think I've seen it go both ways. Like it's undeniable that I've seen Christianity change some people's lives for the good. Of course I have, but I've also seen it do the opposite. And then I've also seen people leave Christianity and become better people afterward. Like it sort of depends on the person and depends on their circumstances, I think. Like my cousin is someone who leaving Christianity was definitely good for him. Like he was just depressed all the time and he was sad and he was always wondering about these big questions. And then I basically told him, dude, if the biggest thing you're wrestling with is what happens to you after you die, then you're living a pretty good life. A lot of people don't have, they can't afford to just be worried about that. They're worried about what they're going to have for food for dinner, or if their house is going to get bombed at night or whatever. Like, you've got it pretty good. And that kind of put him on a different trajectory. And now he's a non-believer and he's way happier, way more successful than he used to be. Growing up, he was always kind of the odd kid out, but now he's, done well in college and stuff. And he's, I don't know, for him, it seemed like it was a better direction for him to go. So I would never say that like Christianity can't inspire people or, give people a meaningful life. That would be ridiculous to say that. Of course, a lot of people throughout history, it's given them, more meaning to do something or meaning to live a better life. But I think it just it's kind of situational and also individually based, as all things are. So
I think it really depends on how you define happiness. But ultimately, I think that I wouldn't agree Christianity is going to make you happier. I think that, and I don't even think, for that matter, that the goal I don't think the goal for living life should be.
Let's use a different adjective than happy, fulfilled, or fulfilled.
But to me, I think that's different. Like I think happiness and meaning, or happiness and fulfillment, are different things. And maybe this is just a difference between an atheistic and a Christian worldview.
No, because I agree with you on that point. Like I should have used a different adjective, because I think you can have a more challenging, in some ways miserable life that will be more fulfilling. I do agree with you. So let's use that word instead. Like I have in both ways. I've seen that happen that way too. I would describe that with my cousin. So
if that's what we're going after, then I guess I would be on the side that Christianity does lead you to a more meaningful life. But that doesn't mean that it's going to be easy. Like for a lot of people, trying to lead a meaningful life is a daily struggle. A lot of them trying to walk. I mean, there's a reason why Jesus said and this is one of those things where it's contradictory. Jesus says, my yoke is easy and my burden is light. But then he also says, wide is the gate that leads to destruction and narrow are the doors that lead to life. So there's aspects about it that are easy and there's aspects about it that are hard. And there's a lot of times where being a Christian is where that path is going to lead to like a lot of anxiety and, maybe anger or confusion, or, you're going to struggle with all of that. But I think people would struggle with that even if they didn't have God, if they didn't have Christianity. I think what Christianity gives is a meaningful substrate, a meaningful backing to reality that gives meaning to life in a way that I don't know how people can have meaning to their life without. But that is one of my more like very strong disagreements with you two, probably is just that I do think that without Christianity, like it's just, I don't know how I would get up in the morning, because to me it's like, well, I'm just a clump of atoms. Like I have no soul. Morality means nothing. Truth means nothing. I'm just a highly evolved
I used to think that too at one time.
Do you really think that though? Like without like outside, not to like go like full on attack, but like without your religious belief, do you think you would just sit here and embrace full nihilism?
Will, didn't you think that at one point, or did you never?
Yeah, I mean, for sure. Like, but as a very young child, like I think I just like had that view of this, like, but I don't know. My slide into atheism was just kind of like it was a longer journey.
I think because my dad, he's been a Christian his entire life, and like 5 years ago, he was telling me that if he came to the realization that the Bible and Jesus weren't real, that he would have no reason to want to live. And now he's sort of coming to that conclusion about Jesus and the Bible, and he still very much has a reason to live. So, like that was when he was 55, and he'd lived this his entire life. And I think when you live it as your life, like, yeah, you can't really imagine having any reason to go.
There's something very almost romantic about the idea that like this is all we got. Like it could end tomorrow.
Oh, I agree with you. But I'm just saying, like, when you're in that mindset, because I was in that mindset for a while too, like this is all completely meaningless and pointless without God. So why give a shit about anything? I certainly don't think that anymore, but I can empathize with that approach because I used to have it at one time.
And I want to be clear here. I'm not saying that all atheists inevitably cannot find ways to find meaning or cannot find ways to be moral people or to care about morality. I just feel like, and I think we talked about this a couple episodes ago, but it's like we have, or I might have talked about this with Jose on my podcast. I can't remember, but it's like the problem is like we're all making some sort of a priori assertion. You know what I mean? Like, but like my faith or my a priori assertion is sort of like that God exists, and from there I can logically back morality and meaning, and like that I have a soul and that I exist in a meaningful way, and I'm not just like a clump of atoms held loosely together, and my consciousness is just an illusion based upon the combination of the electrons firing in my brain combined with programmed like evolutionary patterns encoded in my DNA, because that's what all, like, without God and without belief in something supernatural, that's kind of all we are. That's the reason why the most like scientific atheists basically believe like we have no free will and they're hard determinists, because they just think that we're biological machines for the most part.
Well, if you look at like if I look at a Kenworth W900 tractor, like for a tractor trailer, that thing is fucking beautiful. Like the nice chrome grille on the front, the long nose, everything about it. It's beautiful. Finding out that it's made out of steel and that it has, 8 cylinders firing, and it's, runs off a diesel, and, it's a combustion powered engine, or like whatever you find out about it afterward, that doesn't destroy it for me. That actually, in a way, makes it even cooler. It's like, oh, wow, it's not just this like magical thing going down the road. There's all this stuff that makes that W900 work, that gives it the torque to pull that trailer up an 8% grade or whatever. Finding out the mechanics behind something actually makes it like way more fascinating to me than
I agree with you. The mechanics can make it more fascinating, and that's not what I'm trying to say. What I'm trying to say is like, learning how something works can be great if you're like, like I'm a mechanic by trade, so I actually relate to that a lot. That's why I tried to use
the truck example.
Yeah, so. It's like, I mean, I when I take a transmission apart, and it's like, so like I just tore apart my first 10-speed automatic transmission last week.
Ooh,
and getting my hands into that,
I was excited for a second, and then you just killed the boner.
For me, that's exciting. It's like getting into it, seeing how the parts work, seeing what failed, and fixing it and putting it back together. Like that's amazing. And so I'm not trying to argue against that sort of experience, but it's more like who are we, and what is our identity as people, and then like why. And again, I brought this up before. Like, why do we care about morality? And it's like, why do we care about morality in these ways that are? It's not just like we don't approach morality like, oh, we need to do these things because they're evolutionarily preferable ways for us to live and conduct society. It's like, no, when we're confronted by something evil, even for the most part, unless they're a psychopath, the most hardcore atheist is going to be emotionally, outraged when they encounter somebody who's abused a child, or who's abused a woman, or who has committed murder. It's like, those things don't just like there's something about human depravity, and then the desire by 99% of people to oppose that, and to, even if they disagree on the details, like they, for the most part, people don't look at themselves as bad people. Everyone thinks they're a good person and they want to be good, and they want to oppose the things that they view as evil. And I just, to me, find it hard for me to try to justify that as something compelling and meaningful without God is, to me, just incoherent.
I think if you had a long experience of finding disbelief in God, so like I think a lot of people, they find something that sounds cool and they're like, oh, I'm going to believe that now. And it's not an honest approach, because in my mind, you can't really decide what you believe. It's kind of involuntary.
I agree,
it's a reaction to your experience and what your rationality is or whatever. So with me, and I think also with Will, for me, it was probably like a 6-year process of just slowly not believing and more and more and more of it. I didn't have this experience that just made me go, oh my God, this is so terrible. Fuck this Jesus stuff. I'm done with it. And that's what 90% of Christians ask me, like, what painful experience did you go through in your life that led you to reject God? And it's like, no, there were a couple things, like the guy shooting himself, that sucked, but it didn't make me reject God. Actually, in those times, I was more tempted to draw closer to God and grab, a tighter hold of the beliefs I had. It didn't convince me not to believe in it. It was over like 6 years, I just slowly believed in less and less and less and less of it. And because I used to have the same approach you did, that I would never justify wanting to do anything other than exist if I didn't believe in God. But I just found that not to be true as I went through that evolution. And I think that would probably be the case for almost everyone if they actually
I agree with, so this is where I'm going to try to, I don't want to sound condescending with my answer, but like, it doesn't surprise me that you didn't find that to be true. But the reason why that doesn't surprise me from my Christian perspective is that I don't think that this is the same thing Jordan Peterson says. I don't think that deep down, most people who say they are atheists are truly atheists the whole way down completely to their core. And what I mean by that is that I don't think that people are completely they haven't completely down to their core said, you know what, there is nothing to life except the material. And even if that's not conscious, maybe it's just subconsciously and implicitly, something in you still, in my opinion, is clinging to the idea that there is something beyond just what is material. And so you're kind of still operating psychologically in a religious sense of believing that there is things outside the material, believing in, you don't have it expressed into some sort of explicit religious structure, but that religious instinct to find value and meaning in things is still inside of you. It's like detached from anything.
I also think we're getting a little rough with the definition of atheism. I mean, atheism is the rejection of a God. It's not the rejection of the possibility of any, supernatural existence. I mean, it's like, it's like there's a difference between the idea of a God, a creator, somebody who made this all as some experiment or even if it wasn't an experiment, if you're more of a deist, like some creator who made all this in his own image, versus like if there could be some ethereal plane or something. Like those are two very different things. I mean, I'm not a strict materialist. I don't necessarily think there couldn't be anything beyond the physical. I just think that the construct of God is definitely man-made, and it would take a ton to convince me of that not being true now. And if I hadn't been raised like so strictly religiously, I'd probably be a little more agnostic about that, to be honest. I'll fully admit that. It's just how I've seen people interact with the church and religion and the idea of God that has basically convinced me that that is a human construct.
Well, so I feel like the problem is, and this isn't like your fault, I think the problem is most Christians are brought up with a very poor teaching of what God is, because I don't view God in the sense of like just like he's just a being and he's like the most high being. It's like God is just basically that which is transcendent beyond material. You know what I mean? Like, so like you have natural, and then basically that which is beyond the natural, that which exists in, that space that's hard to define. So that's why the Christian says God is goodness, God is justice, God is truth, God is light. It's like, so I mean, now God, the being, interacts with us in ways that our human brains can comprehend. So he manifests as a being, but he's not just a being. Like he is being, he is existence.
Right,
is the way I would put it. So it's like
that's kind of hard to argue with, though. Like when we start getting to the point where God is just good, like that basis, it's like it's kind of hard.
But how do you define good without God, though? Like that is where I approach atheism and then completely reject it, is because I can't define what good is.
Well, how do you define God? I mean, like good with God, just what God wants, like as per the Bible, like because I wanted to raise my hand earlier and just go like, I think the omission of any kind of moral condemnation of slavery in the Bible is a slam dunk for us edgelord atheists. And like that's
do I have to address the slavery argument?
Please, I mean you can.
Before we go into slavery, I do want to address a couple comments here. So David said, I think Reed is agnostic, and I am, and so is everybody on planet Earth. And then he's saying atheism I would define as the rejection of the supernatural. Agnosticism is the lack of understanding what faith or supernatural is and not finding faith in any specific religion. So luckily, David, you are not the definer of words, but
he's just a boy. Leave him alone.
I know, but
the problem is the problem is these are semantic games.
Let me finish here. Atheism, Christians have turned the term atheism into an indefensible position by how they describe it. Like no non-Christian atheist that I know would make some claim that he knows that there is no God. That's something that Christians have come up with. Like atheism and theism are beliefs. They're not claims of knowledge. None of us have that knowledge as much as we'd like to say we do. Nobody does. So it's kind of like, I mean, we're all agnostic. And if we're atheists or theists, that's just based on our experience and what we've seen in our lives and what makes the most sense to us, what we've arrived at. The reason I don't call myself an agnostic is because I think of that more as an adjective than a noun. Like if you're going to describe yourself as an agnostic, then I think that means you really just don't think about this very much and you have no idea. Like, I mean, I think all four of us are agnostics, but I think to describe ourselves as agnostic would be misleading, because I think both of you guys definitely have strong beliefs. And then Will and I also are kind of convinced of where we are. But at the end of the day, I don't know. So
I think it's just an expression of intellectual honesty.
Sure.
And humility. You know what I mean? To not be like, oh, well, because like, I mean, and it's also like, if I'm to say I'm not agnostic, then it's like, I've basically said there's no difference between faith and absolute certainty. which means like, well, then why even have different words for them, and why? And that's not even biblically coherent. So to me, it's just like to be logically consistent, you kind of have to have an agnostic attitude. Okay, but now Will and I are going to have an autistic fight.
Sure. Really quick, I wanted to say one thing about all this though. But before we get into that, I just wanted to ask Jacob, because I think that like the discussion we got about meaning and like being able to find meaning in material, I think part of the problem with that, and I wonder what you think about this, Jacob, is the idea that like because it is material, it is futile and it's fleeting, and like what God provides is like stability in the sense that it is infinite and truth and moral. Whereas like if I do have faith in a tractor, I mean, that could be destroyed. Like it's the only real thought that I have, like I guess from this conversation, but because I think you guys are kind of touching on important things with the agnosticism there, and then I do want to get into the slavery discussion. But what do you think about that, Jacob?
I'm trying to. So say the first part again.
Just the idea that like, because we can say that like things give. We were kind of engaging in a conversation about
what gives meaning,
and we were saying that atheists can find meaning in things, but I don't think that that's what I said that Christianity provides meaning, but I don't think that that's like the essential thing that it provides. I think it provides something much deeper than that, which is like a form of stability.
Like, right. Because you can find situational meaning. Like you can kind of go like, well, if X, then Y. And you can kind of like find, like once you've established the tractor exists, you can then dissect it and figure out how it works, deduce what its purpose is, and etc. But, that works very well. That's basically just doing science on material things. The problem is, you can't do science on things that are just not analyzable by science or materialism. Like goodness is not a scientific concept. You know what I mean? Like morality is not a scientific concept. And even to some extent, like transcendent meaning and even like human consciousness kind of rides this human consciousness exists in this like Venn diagram where like part of it is science and neurology and physical, but then the other part is like completely like mystical and like what the fuck. Like we even the best neuroscientists are like, yeah, we have like not even a 1% understanding of what the fuck consciousness is and understanding how human perception works and stuff. And that's just consciousness. Then when we get into these subjects of morality and meaning, I just feel like that those are realms that science can't do anything. And so that's why, what you were talking about, Will, before we get into slavery was like, well, how do you define, like defining good without God? It's like, well, without God, I don't know what other tools you have other than science and materialism. And I don't know how you can define.
We'll have to do a whole episode on that because I've got a whole bunch of thoughts, but it'll take an hour and a half to talk about it. So fight over slavery, guys. Let's hear it.
Slavery's bad. Jacob, your point.
Okay. So slavery is not ever just like, there's no passage in the Bible where God goes, and I tell you now, slavery is a human virtue. Go out. There's no like, how God says go be
fruitful and pick those cotton plants,
right? Yeah, there's no command to go out and capture slaves. A lot of like the Old Testament,
be fruitful and catch them runaways. Sorry, that's my last one.
But yeah, I mean, like Old Testament slavery is not really slavery; it's indentured servitude. It's highly regulated. Now, would you
say it's moral though?
Yeah, see, he's going to go full Dawson here. He's going to be like, see, like back in the day, like it wasn't about slavery. It was because no, I'm just kidding.
No, see, the real answer is that like without the slave owner, the slave would just starve and die. The slave owner gives the slave meaning, and no, that's going to be clipped so badly out of context.
Yeah, he's one of us now.
He can finally go on Tower Gang.
Yeah, I'm gonna say this is my pitch to get on Tower Gang here, but I'll just impersonate an 1856 like Southern Christian slave owner.
Come on, give me swing low, swing chariot. Come on, hit it. Let's all come off and then come back on in blackface.
There are very few things that I won't do to get on Tower Gang, and that is on the border of what I might or might not do. I'll have to think about it.
I'll do it right now. Let's go, guys.
No, but so I think Israel at times did break what God's law was. So did they practice slavery in a way that was not biblical? Yes. The biblical thing for indentured servitude was basically like if people owed debts and how to work them off. Every 7 years, their debts were all wiped clean and they were set free. We have to remember that slavery and indentured servitude, these were economic universals in all societies for thousands of years. And it's even in today's society where we think we've all become very, morally enlightened about the subject of slavery, that slavery still exists in our modern day and world. And, some would argue we're communicating on, phones and stuff on a daily basis that are constructed on slave wages and stuff. So it's a nuanced subject, but,
Socialists say that. But.
Yeah. But yeah, I think Old Testament the whole idea like the Bible justifies slavery, it's really easy to show how the Old Testament's not justifying that sort of thing. There's a passage in the New Testament where Jesus says like, now slaves, admonish your masters and serve them well. This is in the context of turning the other cheek and blessing those who persecute you and being, doing like, when you're in, so think about Joseph, right? The story of Joseph in the Old Testament, he was sold into slavery, but instead of like being bitter and angry and just like, my life sucks and this is, whatever, he decided to be the best at, and to do his best at everything that was given to him. And because of that,
unless it was the Pharaoh's wife, they didn't want
right,
to try
yes,
his best at that. But.
Exactly. Yeah,
I'm not even saying like the Bible endorses slavery. I mean, I do think it kind of does in a lot of parts. I couldn't recite, but even just like the 10 commandments in which we're supposed to live by, like the commandments that God gave human beings, it covers honoring your mother and father. There's 4 commandments talking about like, respecting God or not using his name in vain. And he just doesn't get to like, don't own another human being.
Yeah, I think the 10 commandments could be rewritten in a more...
The Satanists did it, and they did a good job.
But the thing is, like, in...
the only one who could complete the 10 commandments was Satan.
Right. Listen, think about how barbaric we sometimes view the Old Testament law in our modern lens, okay? Now realize that the Israelites couldn't even do that. Like, God was like, listen, I don't need you to be good. I just want you to be slightly less evil. And they still couldn't fucking do that. So the whole point...
Yeah, but to be fair, it was, you didn't kill everyone I told you to kill. You left the cows and the women and the children... Like that was the type of shit they couldn't do.
Okay, now we're moving the goalpost off slavery into the completely different topic.
I know, but you were saying conquest.
Like,
yeah, I just had to throw that in there.
No, I know, but yeah, so yeah, my point being that I don't think the Bible endorses slavery. I think the last point to this would be that the abolitionist movement in America to end slavery was predominantly populated by Christians who were making strong Christian arguments, and the Southerners were actually on the losing side of the battle, quoting the Bible, because a lot of 99% of what they were doing in the slave trade, even when they were going to Africa and getting their slaves, and then when they were doing forced breeding slaves, it's all explicitly forbidden by everything that the Bible says about slavery. So it's just to me, it's it's pretty. I think even most reasonable atheists who go beyond just your surface level edgelording atheism and who searched into the subject realize that at the very least it's a lot more nuanced than the Bible endorses slavery.
I think I find it fascinating that you have people who are using the same book on both sides of the argument. That's kind of what that's just what I've come away with all this. I think right after I left Christianity, I think initially I went through a little bit of this angry atheist phase where I was this book has so much evil in it, blah, 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 blah. And I still think some of it's pretty wacky, but I've arrived at the conclusion that it's basically a vehicle and you can use that vehicle for good or for bad. And I don't know, so I don't really, I think the people who can use that message to like Ron Paul and, try to preach peace and prosperity and understanding and tolerance, that's great. And I have absolutely nothing against that. And the rest of the atheists need to kind of catch up to that. Hey, if people are living good lives through this doctrine, why do you care? That's basically where I've gotten with it. But I don't think that it's the only way to get there, and I don't think it necessarily gets you there either. I think it can be abused, and I think people can arrive there with other philosophical backing too. That's just where I am at this point. But the last thing the thing I want to close with, this is something I've been talking about a lot. And Jacob, I'd be interested to know what you think, because I forget, you were conservative originally and then went progressive, right? Is that correct?
I was conservative so I have a conservative upbringing, rebelled against that, went hardcore SJW Bernie bro, and now I've gone full circle and I'm actually probably more trad than my parents.
Yeah, so I guess all four of us were brought up conservatively then. But so here's my big worry. So you guys have heard a lot about how Dave Smith has talked about how the Occupy Wall Street movement got hijacked by identity politics, right? They realized, oh shit, these people are uniting against us, so we need to start talking about microaggressions or whatever, and that completely derailed everything. I think what a lot of people forget is that a decade earlier, the big banks and the weapons manufacturers and the warmongers were mostly pushed by right-wingers, an evangelical right-wing movement with the Project for New American Century, the war in Iraq, the Patriot Act, the war in Afghanistan. And then, there was some red meat thrown to the supporters of, we're going to call these French fries freedom fries. And we think, Harry Potter is, of the devil and that your kids shouldn't be reading that. And we're going to, we think some of this music is too edgy or whatever. That was kind of the movement in the late 90s and early 2000s.
Do you remember the people who were going saying the Harry Potter books give children real spells that real witches do? And I'm it's fucking Latin. The spells are just Latin words. Are you saying Latin is witchcraft? What the fuck?
It's funny how J.K. Rowling has been canceled by Christian conservatives and social justice.
Oh yeah,
she's hit the horseshoe theory of being canceled.
This feeds into exactly what I'm going to say. That in the late 90s, early 2000s, it was this super hardcore right-wing Christian evangelical movement that the corporatocracy and the warmongering machines were hey, this is who we have to push our message and it's going to work. And they were very successful with it for a while. And then in 2010-ish somewhere, that political capital started running dry. People were getting sick of, they're just like, okay, this is stupid. I don't care if people are gay. I don't care if people read Harry Potter. The war in Iraq was a mistake. We shouldn't have done it, whatever. So then they're like, oh, okay, well, you know what? Now actually Raytheon is going to hire transgender employees because we respect them for who they are. And we, the CIA is going to put out this ad about some non-binary black woman we have working for us because we care about, you know, representing the values of progressive people or whatever. So they switched from like being really ultra hardcore right-wing Christian conservative to like retarded left-wing bullshit woke identity politics inside like a decade. And it's my opinion that the progressives are running thin on their political capital. I think that they have pushed everything way too far. Like several years ago, people were a little weirded out by transgender people, but they didn't really care. Now you've got this dude who's like placing 400th on the men's swim team, and then he switches to the women's swim team and he beats everyone by 40 seconds. You've got them putting some guy in a juvenile facility in California when he's 27 years old. And they're also putting him in a women's juvenile facility because I forget what he did. I think he raped someone or murdered someone when he was 17. I forget. But you got like this crazy, insane progressive bullshit that's just gone way off the deep end. So I feel like, you know, the warmongers kind of follow the normies, like whatever the normies are comfortable with. So the normies were comfortable with Bush, Cheney, and then they were like, whoa, fuck this. I'm done with this. Let's go with this Obama guy. And then they've been kind of on board with like the progressive stuff for a while. But now it's like, holy fuck, this is insane. These guys ruined my life. They took my job. They've got a 6'3", you know, dude competing against my daughter on the basketball team. This is insane. I'm done with it. So I'm actually envisioning a swing hard to the right this year, like as far as elected office goes, but then also, you know, slowly throughout the culture, I see that happening. And I think the thing with Charlie Kirk about not giving Satanists First Amendment rights, that was kind of a teaser because we saw how much heat that picked up on Twitter and how many people were like, hell yes, like we're behind this. That was kind of surprising. That's what I see happening. Like, I don't see libertarianism winning big, and I don't see leftism continuing on its winning streak. I think their time is up and they're about to get fucking canned. And I think that the right is actually going to be very susceptible to wanting the government to have a lot more power to beat up on the left because throughout history, whenever it's like, don't you hate these people that were just in charge? Well, if you elect us, look at what we're going to do to them. And I don't mean Fauci and Biden and Newsom. I mean like your left-wing grandmother who voted for Biden and your, you know, the person who runs the greenhouse down the road from you or whatever. Like I kind of see the same shit that's been done to right-wingers over the last couple of years. I think it's going to be fucking weaponized against the other side. But what do you guys think about that? Is that a valid concern, or am I just, you know, living in Ancapistan in my head or something?
You're 100% correct, man. And it ain't just going to be like the lefties. That's me and you, because we're not,
we'll be the lefties, just like we're the right-wing extremists right now. Yeah,
I mean, look at just the post-libertarians who are like libertarians, but they were right-leaning, and they've already started foaming at the mouth to seize power and shit. And some of them are classifying me as just some leftist infiltrator. I'm just like,
even you, Jacob, you too, man?
I mean, not all of them. I'm still friendly with a couple of them, but some of them are,
I'm still friendly with a couple of them.
But some of them are just like, oh, you're just, you know, like 90% of the Hoppian crowd has blocked me on Twitter because they just view me as some kind of fucking leftist infiltrator. Like, I'm probably more fucking right wing than you are, you moron.
That's how I feel too, and that makes me feel a little bit better. Sometimes I feel like I'm the only one getting blocked by these assholes.
No, you're a fucking commie, Will.
No, like they're fucking. Oh, I could go off on just what I think of them, but
bleeding heart liberal. You bleed blue.
They make liberal like sound like a bad word, but I mean, they're talking about we need to go back to the fucking Enlightenment. That's so fucking cringe. That's beyond fucking cringe. That's like they're crusader LARPing. These fucking, I don't know, choir boys that want to act tough. Like,
I mean, I think there's value to critiquing the Enlightenment. There's even value to.
Come on, Jacob.
listen. The Enlightenment. Listen. The Enlightenment brought us like the American Revolution, but it also brought us the French Revolution, fascism, and socialism, and all that.
Because monarchy's a fucking it's a stupid way to structure society. Like it's ridiculous. The fact that we're
all statism is bad, but like they all have their pros and cons. And I like to put monarchy in a good light just to show how democracy is not as good as people are brainwashed to think it is.
In talking shit about democracy, you are in like good company. I'm with you. Fuck it. It's not a perfect system. But and I was even like, I chuckled at a lot of the monarchy shit as I was introduced to it, but it's getting ridiculous to the point like they jump between joking and being serious about the shit. And I know they're not really serious about it. The post-libertarians, whatever the faggots want to call themselves. But like they fucking, it's just like the Satanism ordeal. They switch between like talking about actual Satanists that are just like atheists trolling them, and then just secularism. It
sounded
Marvel,
like Tho
Marvel
Bishop was
is now
basically
Satan.
I'm a Satanist according to Tho Bishop, I think, with what he was like talking
Yeah,
about. I'm like,
I
so
watched
should I not
the
have
last
First Amendment
Spider-Man
rights?
movie, so I fucking It's
it's funny because it's not even.
Now? What the fuck?
I was just gonna say it's funny because like it's not actually what Hoppe believes either. Like I don't really know why like this. I think it kind of like comes from like a Reddit Hoppian thing. Like it's like the memes that you find that everyone.
It's the I read like 3 paragraphs of Hoppe on fucking Twitter.
Yeah, exactly.
Hoppian.
But I was going to say,
I want to read it just so I understand it better. I haven't read any Hoppe. I get all my Hoppe context from.
Isn't his wife like not even? It's not. His wife isn't white. She's some kind of ethnic minority.
He's an atheist too, I believe, right? Hoppe.
Yeah. I think, yeah.
I think so.
Which is hilarious.
Hoppe would like us better than he'd like anyone calling themselves post-libertarian. I'm pretty sure. I haven't read a word of what he's wrote, but I'm pretty sure he'd like us better. And we wouldn't get kicked out of their society or whatever.
On the like swing to the right, I don't know if you guys have heard the Rothbard quote. Scott Horton sent it to me a while ago. It's like, I used to be considered left. And I used to be considered right, but I haven't changed. They've changed, essentially. Like that's the I butchered the quote, but everyone should try to find that article. It's amazing. And also another conversation I had with Scott Horton, he was just saying like the real danger that we are seeing right now with wokeism and just with the COVID lockdowns and everything like that is a hard reaction to the right, because we know that the Republicans, they're the ones with guns. Like they're the ones who, throughout history, right wingers are the ones who react and end up being, pretty damn bad. That's the scary thing is like, if
we're comparable to the Weimar Republic right now.
Yes.
And we know what comes after the Weimar Republic. So.
Exactly. I don't understand what Trudeau thinks what does he benefit from what he's doing right now? Because how do you see in the long term that you maintain power? Throughout all of history, I think they should be able to see that whenever the left cracks down like this, there's a hard response to the right, and it's never good.
But what if they want that? Sometimes I wonder, are these people just trying to antagonize right wingers to actually lash out so that they can justify? Look at how crazy these extremist right wing terrorists are, and with why we need more authoritarianism and more brainwashing in public schools and shit. So,
it's a trap of the right-left paradigm, it's a pendulum that's always swinging back and forth. And we're never going to focus on what, the left would really like to have the class warfare discussion. And we'd like to have the state versus society discussion. But the right-left paradigm always swings back and forth, and we're going to be talking about this culture war until, humanity fucking destroys it.
I'm going to pull a card out of again Will's favorite person, Andrew from Popular Liberty here.
Don't act like I don't like the fella. I've talked a little shit, just a little shit. His tax policy's retarded, but I actually
I just do want to give a shout out to Popular Liberty that he is one of the post-libertarians that does point out that this is coming. Like, he has said we might be living in a truly fascist dictatorship in a couple years at the rate things are going. I'm only mean to him because he said he muted me on Twitter.
But I actually agree with him sometimes, even though it's a little bit of special pleading, but at the same time I kind of do the special pleading myself too, where it's like these reactionary right wingers to me are not actually right wingers, because me, it's like I think actual conservatism, being an actual right winger, means like you don't fall into this high time preference reactionary mindset. Instead, it's like,
but what is DeSantis?
Exactly.
See, this is the thing with these people, not you, but with they're like, the progressives have won every battle for the last 100 years and the conservatives have lost everything. And I'm like, that's not true. And they're like, yes. And when I say progressive, I mean the warmongers and the central bankers and blah, blah. I'm like, oh, okay, well, if that's your definition, fine. And then they go suck DeSantis's cock. And I'm like, according to your definition, he's a fucking progressive.
DeSantis is just an opportunist.
Yeah.
That's all he is.
So if they're going to call George Bush progressive, then guess who is a child of the war on terror, which is George Bush's baby, Ron DeSantis.
Yeah.
So Tho Bishop, let's throw down this gauntlet. I watched it on Reed's interview with him. He says if Ron DeSantis wins as president and governs like George Bush, he will move to Peru. So I say we hold him to it.
I don't want him to leave, though.
It's going to fucking happen. If war on terror just continues on, that motherfucker don't even believe in legalizing marijuana. And these guys act like we need to fucking sit here and listen to what he says. Just because he was slightly good on COVID and just kind of
not even completely good on COVID, just a little bit better than most.
He's going against he's using the state in a way that's inappropriate to combat their overcorrection. I'm sorry, people. There is the argument.
Kristi Noem was the best governor on COVID because she didn't interfere at all. It was just
my governor
do what they want to do.
Governor Kemp. I hate the motherfucker, but he did all right. He didn't do anything terrible. I think Atlanta, they had some restrictions that he did not interfere with, but I never had to wear a mask or anything like that. And he just didn't support. He didn't help Trump in the election when it counted. So he's not really their superstar, just like Ron DeSantis for some reason. He's going to save the fucking country. I don't know. What do you guys think about Ron DeSantis?
I think he's a trap. I think he might be the next Obama. So people were so sick of George Bush and they didn't do any research on the history of how Obama was, but Obama was against he was right on the most important issue of the time, which was the war in Iraq. He voted against the war in Iraq, just like DeSantis was good on the most important issue of the time, the COVID lockdowns, but they ignore everything about him when it comes to free speech. They ignore everything about him when it comes to corporatism, when it comes to police, giving the police more power in the state of Florida. And then he hasn't had a good history on foreign policy. I did find out he was kind of based on Syria. He didn't think we should be arming the rebels against Assad, which was, that's good. I'm glad he thought that.
That is something.
He basically thinks we're not giving Israel enough. We're not hard enough on Iran. He's just
that takes right away from the Syrian position, then, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly. It would be a disaster. So,
my concern is a lot of these people who support DeSantis are hyper localists, and they, they always say, Well, it's hard because like it's not a homogenous group, but like it is weird because you hear so many different arguments coming out of the libertarians who like DeSantis. But why wouldn't you want him to stay governor? Like I just don't understand that.
Like as governor, fine. Like he's just sort of a middle of the road governor in my opinion. It was great on COVID comparatively to the rest of the country. So yeah.
I mean, bad on a lot of other shit as governor, like drug legalization, police reform, all that kind of stuff. Which
Free
every
speech.
Republic, all that, everything that us libertarians just need to kind of like put on the back burner and listen to these post-libertarians, how smart they are as we,
20 more years for the GOP to win liberty, guys.
Yep, exactly.
It'll work. It'll totally work this time.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, because I don't know if you guys have heard this argument, but I've heard from some libertarians that like the people like Scott who pay attention too much to foreign policy are living in the 2000s. Like we're way past this time, but it's like if there is a hard reaction to the right, we will be living in that time again. Not that we've abandoned it. I mean, we are in 7 countries officially, but like,
these are the right wingers who 2 years ago were banging the war drums to go into Iran after we airstrike Soleimani. Like, I mean, you were actually one of them at the time, right? Or were you beyond that at that point?
I was beyond it by the time they went to kill Soleimani. But the first,
Liam's too young.
Yeah, the first time that they bombed Afghanistan and then used the Moab, I was still a supporter of Trump. But that was kind of like the catalyst that was like, wait, what am I doing?
Yeah, but you realize like they're not anti-war at all. They're Republicans. Like it just if it's Trump ending Obama's stupid war, then they're like, okay, yeah, we should probably come home. But then if it's like, I mean, even when Biden pulled us out of Afghanistan, like, yeah, this should have been done better. We should have left when we said we were going to leave so the Taliban wasn't overrunning Kabul while we're on our way out. But he still pulled us out, and all the criticism I saw was this was horrible. We should have stayed 6 months longer, and then we would have been able to contain things, or we should have just kept 10,000 troops there, which is fucking retarded because the whole point was we were going to leave. That was the deal we made with the Taliban. Right. So if we left 10,000 troops there, you think the Taliban would have just been like, huh, okay, well, there's 10,000 troops here,
Well, I think the reason it was botched, like, I mean, this is the more conspiratorial side of me, but like the fact that it was botched almost, I mean, it was almost like they wanted that reaction, that they didn't want another president to risk ending a war. I mean, because we shouldn't have stayed for another 6 months. We should have left by the time we were supposed to leave. I think it was May 1st. The Doha deal, and the Taliban had agreed not to kill any U.S. soldiers up until that point, and then they continued to follow the deal even though we extended our deadline. But that's what put us at risk because I mean they were going to start fighting, and they were giving us a grace period to leave. So I mean that's the biggest problem. I think that we left late.
Yeah, 100%. And then some fucking morons think the Taliban killed 17 Marines or whatever with that bomb. It was like, no, that was ISIS. ISIS and the Taliban are not the same thing, but nobody knows anything. So anyways,
Iraq and Iran are the same thing, right?
Yeah, they're part of Saudi Arabia.
I hate them all. I hate Americans when they talk about foreign policy. Our country, we are.
All I know is that we had to invade Iraq to stop bin Laden.
Right. Even though he was in Pakistan, but all right, guys. Well, that was another great, stirring conversation as usual. Make sure you get Wil Bell's Rabbit Eye Blueberry Wine. There's a link in the description to go buy it. It's good stuff. I've downed a whole bottle during one of these once.
I have done it right now.
Oh, perfect. And if you're not used to this stuff, you'll have to sit on the toilet for a while, but once you get used to it, it's good. So make sure you check that out. But
it's antioxidants.
Will, what's your last word of the day for us?
I just again, like my first statement, like earlier, like we just got to reject this culture war. We got to just embrace it. We're all libertarians. We all want less state intervention in our lives, whatever capacity that means. It doesn't matter what road we take here to get to it. If it's through radical individualism or Christianity or atheism or whatever it means, we're all sitting here agreeing that the state has too much control over our lives. And we got to embrace that and learn how we can move forward, you know, and not fall for the trap that is the culture war.
What you got for us, Liam? And drop your plugs too.
I think libertarians just need to be more humble, especially the Christian libertarians. I think that is the biggest problem. You're turning off a lot of atheists by persecuting them. It's not, you're not helping Christianity. You're not doing us any favors. Also, Reed, just keep up what you're doing. I know they really have attacked you, and I've tried defending you on Twitter when it happens, but I've kind of been taking a hiatus because I'm in the thick of this semester, and it's been crazy. And it was great to see you the other month, even though we didn't do Capitalist Communion. It was awesome to finally see you, and then you had some great guests like James Lindsay, and I would recommend, if anyone hasn't seen that episode, it's great. I think that's the best episode you've had.
Yeah, thanks, Liam. Make sure you guys check out Liam's show and his Twitter account. They're both in the description. And yeah, we met each other in Montana when I was put out of service on the side of the road because the roads were too shitty and I almost crashed. So that was kind of cool. What do you got for us? Biblical atheism. I like that. Someone called you that. I thought that was hilarious. I was like, I was kind of saying that's sort of what I am almost. Like I take a lot of lessons out of the Bible, but
you should make that your alt account.
Yeah, biblical atheism.
No, I guess I'll echo the point I tried to make earlier, which is just that, like, you know, we will not make society more Christian by acting unchristian, and we don't overcome evil with evil. We have to overcome evil with good. So the minute you try to, you know, some of these Christians who are feeling persecuted, it's like, I mean, you know, I think a lot of them are spoiled. Like, look at the Bible. Look at the original progenitors of our faith. Like, they were stoned to death. Like, if the biggest thing you have to endure is that, like, there's people who disagree with you and say mean things on the internet, like, you need to grow a thicker skin, man. You just gotta, like, there's some people who are suffering some real fucking shit in this planet. I mean, you know, we haven't done Dave Smith and Scott Horton justice. We haven't dropped Yemen enough in this episode like Dave and Scott do. Like, if I was doing a running count, I think Dave dropped Yemen like 10 times in an hour on Rogan podcast.
I still haven't listened to that yet. I'm driving to Texas this weekend, so
there were Mulberts that were being pissy about that. Dave Smith said that in front of a million people, and he needs
to say it more.
Exactly.
I mean, you know what I mean? It's like, it'd be like, imagine if you were like, if you had social media during like the Nazi Germany Holocaust, and that wasn't what you were talking about anytime you got a chance to be in front of a bunch of people. So yeah, I mean, so just to summarize quickly, grow thicker skin, imitate Christ if you're going to make that your namesake, and
or just imitate him anyway. I would say I don't think anyone can really disagree with that.
You're good enough. Yeah, you're good doing it either way, but it's especially recommended if you're going to like label yourself as a follower of him. You might want to, you know, follow his example. At least try to some of the time. So you can follow me on Twitter at Biblical Anarchy. I do a podcast, although I'm on a bit of a hiatus right now because I'm just like, you know, shoulder deep in Libertarian Party mud and shit right now. But
fun.
Yeah, but come March, the Pennsylvania convention will be over, and I will go back into normal podcasting routine. So if you want to check me out there, it's Daniel 3 Biblical Anarchy, and it's on YouTube, Odyssey, and all major podcatchers. And that's it for me. Thanks again for having me, Reed.
Absolutely, man. Monday night, I'll have Spike Cohen on the show. Tuesday night, Scott Horton and a few guys from the Utah Mises Caucus are going to come on, and we're going to be talking about Defend the Guard legislation and other Libertarian Party stuff in the state of Utah. And then Friday and Saturday, I will be doing a speech on Friday night for the Libertarian Party of Utah, and then introducing Scott Horton on Saturday. If you go to my Twitter, I've been tweeting out the link where you can sign up for that. There's going to be a dinner on Friday night and then an event on Saturday with Scott Horton here in Salt Lake City. So if you're around, make sure you check that out. And yeah, we'll end the stream there. Another good one, guys. Thanks for coming on, and thank you everyone for watching.